Okay, story time about the time that my mother had me arrested when I was 26 years old and pregnant out to here. So when I was around 17, my mother wrote a check to me for money that she was holding that belonged to me because I was going to get married, which she was completely behind, of course, because, I was going to marry somebody that wasn't going to be a good idea for me. Anyway, she writes this check. I decide I'm not going to get married, and I have the money in my bank account. So I'm using it for mostly food. I'm not saying I didn't buy like a pair of shoes or anything. I did. I was 17 years old, and it was my money. Anyway, lo and behold, within about a week, checks start bouncing because she stopped payment. Because she stopped payment on the check. And I never went to make good on it. I was 17, I was terrified, and I just let it go. I let it go. I did try to get her to replace the money because, they put the checks in twice back then, but that fell on deaf ears. That fell on deaf ears. So that was it. That was all. Fast forward, I'm 26. I'm happily married. I have a stable family life. I'm happily married. I have a stable family life. I haven't spoken to her in at least 3 years at this point in time. And the police knock, knock, knock at my door. They arrest me. And fortunately, they allow me to come down to the station voluntarily. They don't put me in handcuffs and process me in that way, but I was processed. And I did have to go to court. And I did have to fight the whole thing. And when I got to court, the judge is like, why am I seeing something from when you were a minor? All of this has been shut. What is going on here? And I basically had to pay a fine of, I don't know, $50 or $150, and it was over. But the amount of stress that I went through, I cannot begin to explain to you. The embarrassment, having to tell my husband at the time, it was really traumatic and devastating. And I was pregnant. She was also calling my house behind my back. And my mother-in-law, who didn't speak English, would hand the phone to my eldest daughter, who knew my mother, because when I went no contact, she was about 6 years old. And she's telling my oldest daughter not to tell me that she's calling and how much grandma loves her and all this and all that. And it only happened a couple of times because during this time I ended up going into the hospital having my baby. And when I got home, my daughter told me. So I called my mother and, I'm not in a happy place. And at first I'm very, fawning, triggered, freaked out because as angry as I am, I'm still terrified. I'm still that little girl inside. So much so actually that my husband at the time, is on the other line downstairs as a witness. So that if she tries to gaslight me or I become overwhelmed, I have support. The conversation starts with, oh, you had your baby. Is she cute? What's her name? Like nothing happened. Like you did not just have me arrested while I was pregnant and create this hell in my life and tell my own child to lie to me. And I'm like, what? And I said, no, I'm calling you back for 2 reasons. One, don't ever call my house again. Do not call my daughter. Do not tell her to keep secrets. She didn't keep the secret. And I used that as a lesson to her that we don't have secrets in our house. And on that note, I confronted her about the CSA, about my grandfather molesting me. And all she could continually say back to me was, my father? Your grandfather? My father? My father? My father? Your grandfather? My father, a child molester? She never once said it didn't happen. She never once said there's no way that that's possible. She never denied it. And that was the end of the conversation. That is the only point in time in my life that I ever confronted my mother in words. And now I would do it very differently because I'm not afraid of her anymore. But I also don't have the need to do it now because I know exactly what she would say. That never happened. That's where she would go now. Anything that I would say to her now, anything that I would bring up, she wouldn't say you're remembering it wrong. She would simply say it never happened because that's who she is.